As CAT Logistics made its way back to the Academy to deliver a report of its drunken students blowing themselves up, the crew of company's flagship, CLS Second Chance, noticed a certain change in behavior of their second-in-command, Lieutenant Europa. Varuna was always coldly distant and rather unpleasant when talking to the crew, but lately she seemed to be a bit more sociable, which meant she often visited Dr. Disco, Captain House and Sister Zala. Though, as some of House's crew mentioned later, their captain always seemed to be sweating a bit after meeting her. Varuna certainly seemed a bit more intense and snarled at anyone who mentioned their boss, Mr. Cart, within her earshot, though no one could really figure out why. She also seemed to do some sort of handiwork for him, for several times during late night shifts, night cycle crew members spotted her carrying tools and various machines to Cart's quarters. No one knew what she was doing, but she apparently took motion sensors from a bunch of old missiles, so perhaps it was better to not ask. "Varuna, I'm telling you, there's no need for all this fortification," Mr. Cart said to her one night, as she was in the middle of her work. He tried to put his hand on her shoulder, but was a bit too short for that, what with the lack of legs and very short arms. So a pat on the shoulder turned into a pat on the back, one that seemingly woke Varuna up from some fever dream. "Sorry, boss, but I can't really do that," she said, but she stopped what she was doing and sat down on the floor. "Was supposed to be your bodyguard and keep you secret, but I fucked up. I hate fucking up. They engineered me to hate fucking up, so now I really have to make up for it." "Yes, I know. But you don't have to go quite so far as to plant mines on my doors. I mean, you're the one who's using them most of the time, so it feels a bit counterproductive." "Please, I can avoid these with my eyes closed," she said with a weak smile, but the words of her boss had an effect, because she detached the explosive device from the wall, much to Mr. Cart's relief. "I'm still worried that you let them go though, boss, that's all. I keep expecting them to rat you out to someone." "And what will they say, Varuna? That they saw an ugly half-man, half-mobility scooter? There are weirder people with weirder augments out there in the system. Remember that guy from our old crew who cut off his own legs and replaced them with caterpillar treads like a tank? Stupid bastard wouldn't fit in any doorway or airlock, so we had to fire him, but damn was he proud of himself. Even if they showed someone a video of our encounter, no one would probably care." "Except for those people who would, but I guess that talk we had with them will be enough to keep them silent." Mr. Cart nodded. Oh yes, it was enlightening conversation indeed, though he had to admit it was also a bit scary to know the truth about his subordinates. "I think some of the things we learned could bite us in the ass a lot harder than them ratting us out to anyone." "You think?" Varuna rolled her eyes. "Just how lucky, or, well, unlucky we must be to get not one, not two, but 3 castaways with us. We should try Tritakian lottery one day. But I guess us knowing their secrets will indeed be enough to secure their silence. I certainly hope so, for all our sakes. If Warl Kanda shows up for House, I don't think we should keep him away from her." "No can do. Remember what I told them. Anyone going for them would have to go through me, and I'm not that easy to move when my wheels are locked," Mr. Katz said, and Varuna rolled her eyes at him. He used that line way too often. "And still, the one that worries me the most is actually Dr. Disco. I feel like we should never even mention him, in case walls have ears." Varuna looked around in an exaggerated, conspirational fashion, but her eyes remained serious. "And don't forget to add Knights of Loot to that. Boss, we really know how to make enemies even without being aware of it, don't we?" "Hopefully they're just as unaware as us, then. And I suppose keeping an eye out all the time is a decent price to pay for all the skills our dear officers bring to the table." "And their contacts. Mostly their contacts, really. And here I wanted to complain one day that you only hire old people, but it turns out old people had a whole load of time to make friends everywhere." "True enough, but I guess we kinda break that trope now that all of our associates and crew are dead. Hey, don't look at me like that, we are old. You're just lucky to not look like you are." "I know, thank you, please stop reminding me," Varuna said, and the tension in the room lowered considerably. Maybe the lieutenant thought fucking up her security detail wouldn't be too bad, but she only allowed herself a second of relaxation before old instincts kicked in. She finished installing the last motion sensor, connected directly to her neural implant, and turned to her boss. Behind him, on the screens, Galatian Academy was slowly getting closer. Righto, now if those doors open without my say-so, I'll know immediately. And as for you, boss, you know what to do. Mr. Card muttered a positive response, but Varuna's eyes drilled holes in him. Repeat the procedure, boss. If I hear a ping, I have to press the purple button on my card to lower an emergency blast door and wait until you give an all clear. Damn it, Varuna, you don't have to treat me like some priceless porcelain figurine that will break if someone breathes on it. Yes, but you tend to forget yourself when you fly, especially when you fly. So I will have you recite that procedure at least 10 times a day until it drills itself into your skull. You truly are a Tritak murder machine, Mr. Card sighed in response. I know. That's why we work together. Now, I need to get back to the bridge and prepare everyone for docking. Orbiting the Academy. Wonder what kind of crisis they're going through this time. Let's hope it's nothing that will prevent them from paying, her boss said and turned to command console. Oh, and did you apologize to Jesselton like I asked you to? No, I hit him in self-defense. Varuna, he threw a plastic bottle of water at you and you broke both of his arms. There was a lot of people swinging heavy things in that cargo hold. I thought it was a grenade. Right. Look, I know you don't like him, but please don't antagonize one of our best comm operators. It's hard to find someone willing to just sit for 12 hours and listen to nothing for an entire shift. Fine. I just wish he stopped muttering his mantras all the time. But I'll tell him I'm sorry, assuming he won't run away when he sees me. We'll see you later, boss. Now get steering, eh? Before we crash and become Academy's new crisis. Varuna said and left, leaving Mr. Cart alone so he could focus on getting into Galatian orbit. Most pilots in the sector would have needed a nav computer to pull off such a maneuver properly and without wasting fuel, but to him it was as natural as breathing. But as the fleet approached Academy and the comms were opened, something that no one in Cart Logistics expected has happened. Hello there, Spacers! A cheerful voice of Academician Sebastian ringed through the comm. We've been expecting you. You have permission to dock at berths 5 to 20. All right then, Mr. Cart said, surprised. Just like that? No reality-ending crisis on your end this time? No, worry not, our spring break festivities ended a few weeks ago, and we even managed to burn away all that self-aware mass that took over most of the atrium. Though I'm sure something is exploding in some lab somewhere. Let's hope these labs are not close to our docking bays then, Mr. Cart said and moved the fleet to land. An armada of small tug drones detached itself from the station and guided incoming ships in. Even a child would be able to dock at the Academy, even though it took a bit longer than usual, overly fast and furious landing most spaces we're used to. Still, that time was enough for Mr. Cart to inform Sebastian of the fate of Academy students, and the Academician's cheerful smile disappeared beneath a cloud of sorrow. Oh dear, he started, shaken by the news. So many young, bright lives. Such a waste. But I thank you for information regardless, it just surprised me. Our students are known to be rowdy, but not to the point of blowing themselves up. At least, not in such a stupid way. Sorry, I'm rambling. I just knew most of them on first-name basis is all. I'll have to inform their families, but I'm not sure how to even start doing it. I may have a form prepared, Mr. Cart said, trying to sound respectful. Sebastian was clearly not used to death like most of the population of the sector was. For those times when employees in my fleet have a fatal accident, I'll send it to you, maybe it will help. Sebastian's eyes unfocused for a moment and then he nodded. Thanks, Captain. Do you have to deal with things like that often? More often than I'd like, that's for sure. Space is dangerous, Salvis. An accident here, an argument out of control there, and it all adds up. Used to fly with almost 2,000 people a few years ago, until we got ambushed by raiders, and out of those 2,000, only 2 made it out. I see. Sorry for bringing it up, Captain, Alvis said. He was silent for a few more minutes, and then continued. It's not the best moment to ask, I know, but did you happen to recover that object you were sent to find? Aye, that we did. Here, let me show you, Mr. Cart said, and switched display to video feed from one of the cameras in the cargo hold, where the weird tank, and its weirder occupants were being prepared to disembark. Not gonna lie, Mr. Sebastian, I'd love to see this thing off my ship as soon as possible. The noises it makes scare my men. And me. But this is not what you were sent to recover, Mr. Cart. You were supposed to bring, well, you know, something belonging to IT department. Wasn't there something else in the outpost? Yes, there was plenty of rubble, because, let me remind you, it exploded. And there were more of those tanks in the other outpost, but whatever was inside of them broke free and killed the only remaining student, so we didn't exactly spend much time there. Not to mention that even now you still didn't tell me what exactly we were supposed to find, only that it would be distinct. I'd say this is distinct enough. He spouted this entire tirade in one rant, hoping that anger in his voice would cover up his lies, and clearly it worked on Sebastian. I understand there's no need to raise your voice, the academician said weakly. It's just procedures, you know. I can't say what I can't say, but still I'm sure Xenobiology department would be pleased to have this experiment back, so I suppose it's mission accomplished. Let me just make a transfer. Thank you kindly, Mr. Cart said, looking at a nice number of credits appearing on the company account. But let me remind you, we still had a deal with your Provost. She was supposed to tell us about those anomalies in hyperspace. Oh yes, she mentioned that. In fact, that's the reason we invited you to dock. Provost Anahita Baird has invited you to tea as soon as you land, Captain. That's, generous of her, and kind, Mr. Cart said, utterly confused. But I'm afraid I'm not that good at talking to people face to face, and I wouldn't want to be a bother, so if you could just tell her to send data on these anomalies our way, we could... He rambled, but Sebastian interrupted. She said you'd be unwilling, Captain. She also said that in such case I'm supposed to, mention something about your mysterious employer from Ilm, though I'm not sure what Madame Baird meant by that. Mr. Cart went pale under his helmet and cursed in his mind. Next to him, Varuna, who was also on the comms, raised a questioning eyebrow but remained quiet for now. I see, her boss said, resigned. In that case, tell the Provost that I'd love to meet her, though I must insist on requesting a shuttle to her office. My ability to walk is a bit impaired, you see. Oh, of course, I'm sending one out already. A fully automated one without any prying eyes. You're not the only person who values their privacy, Sebastian said with a conspirational smile. By the way, Madame Baird also said that you can bring your cloned bodyguard with you, though, again, I'm not sure what she meant by that, considering that cloning is illegal in most jurisdictions. Maybe she meant cool bodyguard? Mr. Cart said, and immediately hated himself for it. Possibly. Anyway, the shuttle will be arriving shortly, so please prepare. I'll contact you again once it's ready to pick you up. And with that, Alvis Sebastian cut the comm, and Varuna and her boss stared at each other with confusion. Well, looks like this Provost lady knows a fair bit about us. So she does, Varuna replied, and then looked her boss straight in the eye. Well, straight in the visor. But what surprised me was how easy she convinced you to actually meet her face-to-face, boss. Normally you just ignore it and leave, but one mention of our contact on Ilm and you rolled over. Just what the hell is going on with that employer of ours? Mr. Cart opened his mouth to say something. Then he closed it and just stood there, silent and motionless for a few moments. You can't just not say anything and hope I'll forget, boss. Look, is someone blackmailing or threatening you? If yes, you should know that if there's one person you can actually tell the truth, it's me. Even if it would put you and everyone we know in mortal danger, Mr. Cart finally said. Yes, I told you many times you don't have to worry about me, and if it's really that much of a secret, you know full well I can keep one, and more importantly, you know why. Very well. Then as soon as we're done with this tea with the Provost business, I'll tell you. Deal? Deal. Should I take my knives with me? All of them, Mr. Cart said, and Varuna rushed off to put on her armor. When the shuttle arrived, she was decked from head to toe in protective gear, but even all that added weight didn't slow her down as she helped her boss board the Academy transport. The trip took a good 10 minutes. Until now, crew of CART Logistics only observed the station through external ship cameras on the sensors, and only now, when they finally docked, did they realize just how massive the station was. It had no visible weapon emplacements on its massive hull, but everyone suspected this place could obliterate any attacker dumb enough to try and mess with the scholars. Finally, though, the shuttle docked at a small airlock close to the core of the station, and a corridor extended itself from it to greet them. The boss and his bodyguard left the shuttle and walked down the corridor, until suddenly a robotic voice started talking to them. "Welcome to Galatian Academy. As this is your first visit, please take a moment to undergo decontamination." A wave of weird-smelling, ionized air rushed through the room, causing Varuna's hair to stand up and stick out in all directions. She felt a burning sensations on exposed parts of her face, as if someone poured alcohol on a fresh wound. Mr. Cart's spacesuit fizzled in a few places. "Pathogen list updated. Thank you for your contribution to science, visitors. Now, please do not move and await for the scan. Scanning. Querying hegemony databanks. Crime record found. Crimes. Smuggling of contraband. Industrial sabotage. Disruption." "Apologies for that, let me quickly type something," a new voice said, cutting off the automated assistant. "There we go, everything's clean. Scan complete, yada yada, please come in." "I hate coming here," Mr. Cart muttered, but rolled forward, with Varuna diligently following one step behind him. The second set of doors opened before them, and there they saw the Provost's office. "Fancy," Varuna said, taking it all in. It was indeed a very uncommon kind of place, especially in Persian sector. A large room with wooden walls and ceilings, with an enticingly soft carpet covering the floor. Walls were covered almost entirely by cabinets with books, not datapads but actual old-school paperbacks. Warm yellow light of old-fashioned lamps and actual wood-fueled fireplace illuminated the area. For a second, an unwitting guest could think they went back in time into ancient times, where humans lived only on Earth and enjoyed cozy rooms like that. But then, inevitably, that guest would notice a dominant feature of that room. A large dark wood desk, shaped like a half-circle, was standing directly in the middle, and above it floated dozens of holoscreens. The Provost clearly liked old-fashioned aesthetics, but she also had work to do. And the Provost herself, of course, was in the room as well, though she was barely visible from behind her desk. As it turned out, if you wanted to describe Provost Anahita Baird with one word, that word would almost inevitably be short. When she sat in her chair, her head was barely visible above her desk, and she seemed to use some kind of exoskeleton attached to her arms to operate screens beyond her reach. For a split second, Mr. Cart's heart stopped. Could she be? But no, one more look and he knew he was wrong. The Provost was just short, that's all. "Since you're clearly so impressed with my room, please also note this antique globe in the corner, which represents actual old Earth," she said, walking out from behind her desk. Now that the screens were no longer in the way, it was easy to see that the Provost didn't sleep well last night, or for many, many nights for that matter. "Anahita Baird, Provost of Galatian Academy, at your service," she continued, walking towards her guests. "And you must be Mr. Cart." She took a long look at him, taking his bizarre half-human, half-machine form in, just like he was staring at her room a few seconds before. "I assume it's not your real name, but considering your circumstances, that moniker works pretty well. I suppose that by this logic I would be Miss Lungs. Regardless, it's a pleasure to finally meet a smuggler captain of whom I heard such complicated things." "Not a smuggler, madam, a CEO of logistics company," Mr. Cart said, trying his best to sound offended. Of course, I assume you even pay your taxes when you can't avoid it. And you, miss, must be Varuna Europa, formerly of Hegemony Navy and Tritakian Security Service before that, under different names, or numbers, of course. Pleasure to meet you." Varuna just nodded with empty eyes. Before they came aboard, Mr. Cart and Varuna decided that she'd remain quiet and act like a mindless clone goon. Clearly, the Provost knew much about them, but there was no point in revealing any more. Very stoic. Truly a pinnacle of genetic engineering, if I do say so myself. But please do not stand around, please take a sit. The tea will be ready shortly, and then we can talk about your request. Varuna remained motionless, with just her eyes observing the room for threats. Mr. Cart slowly rolled himself to the table Anahita pointed to, and observed as she poured 3 cups of tea. Even through filters on his helmet he could smell it. It was genuine, real stuff. Well, guess Miss Varuna won't be sitting, and you are kinda sitting already, Mr. Cart, so... The Provost started, placing porcelain cups on the table. Please, enjoy your drink, though it may be difficult with that helmet in the way. Worry not, madam, I do have my emergency induction port exactly for occasions like these, Mr. Cart replied. This is just a straw, I'm afraid. Emergency induction port, he said firmly, and slurped some tea through it. It really was delicious, and probably worth more than most people earn in a year. Now, can we please get down to business? The Provost nodded and sat down on the other side of the table, where she pulled out an old, battered wooden pipe, slowly filled it and lighted up. Mr. Cart remained silent through this entire ceremony, as it clearly had some special meaning for the old woman. Still, he was painfully aware that she was wasting his time, and she knew, and he knew. Ah, and here's the reason I'd be Miss Langs in your book, she said, blowing out a cloud of smoke that hung in the air. Awful and unhealthy habit, that, but at least it doesn't affect my brain compared to things a lot of my fellow academicians smoke, or drink, or inhale, or inject themselves with. Still, first and foremost, I'd like to thank you for the services rendered on behalf of our academy. This trip to outer sectors to our outpost was not something many Persian mercenaries would be willing to pull off, so again, my thanks. Even though you did not bring the object you were sent to retrieve. Because no one told me what to bring back, miss, Mr. Cart said. But on that note, what the hell even was that thing we recovered? The creature inside the tank, I mean. The noises it made kept my crew awake at night. Anahita offered him a smile. I assumed you'd know. It's a very interesting project born from cooperation between engineering and biology departments. Essentially, it was supposed to bring some much-needed income to our academy. You see, we may have lost contact with the rest of humanity and reverted to base barbarism and tribalism, but demand for luxuries remained as high as ever. If anything, tastes became even more particular after domain gates shut down. Problem is, 3D printing everything is not exactly cost and resource effective sometimes, especially when we lost a lot of old manufacturing technology. Additionally, mass-produced goods are just that, mass-produced. There's no heart to them, but in old times, long, long ago, humans often enjoyed artisanal goods, made by hand from actual natural materials. And they do like goods like that now as well. Only artisans and goods are a lot harder to come by. So, we decided to remedy that by artificially growing a bunch of things, plants and animals mostly, which could then be harvested and turned into ornate objects one couldn't find anywhere in the sector. And the tank you recovered contained a very useful animal indeed. Its skin can be used as leather, its body can of course be turned into food, its bones can be used in so many chemical and industrial processes, and all that powered by grass. As I say, very useful creature indeed. It's called a cow. The room was silent for several seconds before Mr. Cart finally said, "So, you're telling me that old domain humans domesticated these bizarre alien things? To what? Rip their skin off and turn them into boots?" Precisely. Though the creature, believe it or not, is not alien in nature. In fact, it originates from Earth itself, same as we do. Now granted, the old ones may have looked a bit differently. Sadly, we didn't have any pictures in our post-collapse databases, and only walked off some DNA samples we found in an abandoned laboratory far away from the core. But I'm told the creature performs its function, so I guess that's really the important part. Well then, I'm glad we could bring this antique specimen back to you. Make sure to keep it confined, though. One of them broke free and gored one of our students to death. So I've heard. Shame that, but I'm afraid those horns it has are the reason. Still odd, though. The notes said that the creatures were docile herbivores. Maybe they didn't like being kept in a tank, Mr. Katz said, and Varuna nodded slightly from her spot near the door. Possibly. Or maybe we messed something up during growing process. But tell you what, why don't you keep the tank? It can grow pretty much any organic thing you want it to, assuming proper conditions and amount of energy. Consider this a bonus payment for services rendered. It's quite, generous of you, Madam Provost, Mr. Katz said, confused. But thank you, of course. We'll find a way to utilize it in some way, I have no doubts. But now we could move to the real reason we're here, your intel about those hyperspace beings that jumped us. Oh yes, those creatures, or entities. I'm afraid though that you will be disappointed by the information I'll give you, because quite frankly we know almost nothing about them, though knowing what we don't know can also tell us a great deal, or at least guide us in the right direction. Mr. Katz tried to say something, but Anahita was in full lecture mode. He felt it would be wrong to interrupt her. You see, we humans tend to focus on things we can measure. Mass, energy, movement, shape or size. Problem is, those qualities are intrinsically connected to the material world, and hyperspace, as you're probably aware, is not material at all. Yeah, I know. Our hyperdrives actually create a bubble of real space around the fleet, which is why it takes so much energy to power them. Correct. Impressive. I know admirals and ship designers who are not aware of that. But what that means is that we simply lack instruments to adequately scan those things, because we do not even know what we're looking for. They do show us contacts on our sensors, which implies they possess some energy, except looking for different signatures yielded no results. So perhaps they are a completely different, unknown form of energy, only native to hyperspace. They do not seem to have mass, which again is odd, since a being with no mass shouldn't possess any energy. We know they do not communicate with us, or at least not in any meaningful or perceivable way, but that doesn't mean they're unable to do so. Maybe we simply cannot understand it. However, from observations of various researchers over the course of over 200 years, we know that they do seem to act a bit like animals. You can sometimes see groups of them just floating around each other as if they were playing, but again, this is just an assumption. Who knows, what we see as them frolicking around like dolphins in the ocean may actually be some kind of important ritual to them. We know there are varieties of them, smaller ones who run around, medium-sized ones who tend to follow fleets around, and big ones, massive signatures that are spanning up to 1 light year. You probably have seen them before. They seem to create those slipstreams in hyperspace wherever they go, though once again, why or how they do it still eludes us. But most importantly, they do possess some form of self-preservation instinct, which is why they always run away before anyone can even get close to them. And now, thanks to you, we also know a way to scare them off. Oh, does that mean I can get a degree in academic donations for finding that out? Mr. Katz said. Never mind, it was just a joke. What you're telling me is that, basically, we know absolutely nothing about them. Yes, very much so, Anahita said, but her smile widened, though her eyes suddenly became cold. But I didn't say everything yet. We do not have many records of pre-collapse knowledge, but we have enough to establish a decent timeline of events. And here's one thing. There are no mentions of those entities before the collapse, not a single one. However, the very first report of them is marked exactly on the days when the gates shut down, a mere few hours after it happened. So what? Are you telling me these things somehow disconnected us from the rest of the domain? Perhaps. Or perhaps the collapse of Gate Network woke them up, or even began their existence in the first place. Still, it is just speculation, as I said. They are not hostile to humans, and they don't compete with us over resources, so no one really cares much about them, I'm afraid. but they are hostile. I told you what happened when we last met one of them. Indeed, which is quite fascinating because of another observation made over the years. The entities were never hostile to humans, but for reasons we can discern, they seem to become very agitated in presence of artificial intelligence. There are several reports from AI wars describing how entire Tritachyon automated fleets were waylaid in hyperspace and disappeared after encountering these entities. Which is interesting, wouldn't you say? I doubt that a small logistics company would have an access to an AI. She said that last sentence smiling like a shark, and Mr. Cart started to sweat under the helmet. This woman knew way too much. Oh well, perhaps it's yet another unknown quality about them. But I believe that's all we know about them, Mr. Cart. I'm very sorry that I wasn't able to tell you more, but... You have said enough, Madam Provost. I know more than before now, so I thank you for your intel. Of course, glad to be of service. Now then, if you do not mind, I have a question as well. Or a request, perhaps. How would you like to continue working for the Academy? You know already our organization can be generous and discreet when it needs to be. Mr. Cart sighed. She knew, he knew. Anahita Baird might have been a small, old and wizened lady, but her mind was sharp as a razor blade, and that little hint that she knew about Midnight Dissonance meant that she had him by the balls, so he just nodded and indicated for her to continue. Splendid, she said, once again smiling brightly. Now I know that your previous assignments might have seemed a bit disjointed to you right now, but you can believe me when I say that it's all for a greater plan and an even greater cause. But like all big plans, small things need to be accomplished first. Some deliveries, some recoveries, some negotiations. Shouldn't be anything a person of such skill as yourself and your companions couldn't handle. You could even say that having connections among pirates and pathers may be beneficial here. Very well, you can send me the details on the job you want us to do, but I assume you won't tell me about that plan of yours. No, not yet at least. As a businessman, I'm sure you know how important it is to not reveal your hand until you are ready to play it. But I trust you, Mr. Cart, and I feel that despite your no doubt unpleasant thoughts about me, we will see eye to eye once my plan's revealed. I will trust you on that then, because I have to. But why us? For the money you're paying, you could hire 2 or 3 mercenary fleets to do your work. That I could. But the most Persian mercs, the idea of acquired jobs involves explosions, destroyed spaceships and raided trade convoys. I do not need killers, Mr. Logistics. I need people who can stay under the radar, just like you do, and do things without broadcasting their presence to the entire sector. And your way of always sneaking everywhere is perfect for what I have in mind. Fine then, you can consider us on board. Just one more question. How the hell do you know so much about us? No, that's very simple. I had Sebastian upload spy software onto your fleet's computers when your friend from Ilm tried to break into our network. Wait, she tried what? So you were not aware? Interesting. And enlightening. But worry not, I'm going to delete the program right now. In fact, you should thank me. Our little bug also scrapped trackers, hegemony and syndrians planted in your network. Now, I apologize for doing that, but I only did that to investigate your friend from Ilm, and I was sure you were in on it. You will excuse me if I won't bow my head in gratitude to you, Madam Provost, and if I'll conduct my own system check when we get back. By all means, please do. In fact, you should do it more often. But what about our deal? You don't need to ask, we will work for you anyway, but I need some assurance that you won't use your knowledge against us. I won't. As I said, I trust you and I hope that in time, despite my underhanded actions, you will learn to trust me. Now, I'm sending you details of the jobs that need to be done. I hope to see you soon, and I hope that you enjoyed the tea. It was delicious, Madam Provost. Good day. Mr. Cart couldn't sound more cold if he was a talking glacier. He nodded to Varuna and they returned to the ship without saying a word. Then, as soon as they came back, they spent another 3 hours checking and rechecking every system in the fleet for bugs and trackers, but couldn't find anything. Perhaps Anahita really deleted her spyware, or perhaps it was simply too complex for them to spot. Still, they couldn't just stay silent forever, so eventually Varuna said, "Well, guess we have a new steady source of income at least," she said, then looked her boss straight in the eye. "Which is odd once again. What does she have a new boss? Why did she mention that Ilm person again, and why that knowledge is making you roll over for this old hag?" Mr. Couch shook his head. This was it. He could hide it no more, not from Varuna at least. He knew that she wouldn't take the news lightly, but at this point, honesty was the only way. "Our employer from Ilm isn't actually on Ilm. She's here with us, in the fleet, although not in the way you expect. Midnight, no more hiding. Come out and introduce yourself."
"Hello, I am Midnight Dissonant."
A digitalized, distorted face appeared on one of the screens.
"And I am an alpha-level artificial intelligence. I know we don't have the best reputation, but—"
The rest of her introduction, however, was drowned out by a scream of pain, because as soon as her face appeared, Varuna, in one swift motion, turned around on her heel and stabbed her boss in the heart.